Justice never dies! Kiss my axe!
Queer integration is really hard to do. We've been trying since the modern era, but it didn't see much progress starting out. That was until 1969, when the Stonewall riots kicked off in response to the police raids. Following Stonewall, there was a push for gay assimilation that was never seen before. The 70s were the start for dozens of queer activism groups as well as LGBT resources. Things like newspapers, support lines, and entire foundations centered around supporting the community propped up. It didn't really get anywhere, legally, as you can tell, but it did some good anyways. It was thanks to that momentum that 40 years later, same-sex marriage was finally legalized. And more importantly, it set up safe spaces for people that didn't really have many. However, Stonewall didn't change the fact that being queer was exactly that. Gay, at the time, and still now, was widely synonymous with promiscuity, druggie, pedophile, and AIDS, especially around the 80s. It took a lot of effort to nudge those stereotypes out of the way. More specifically, effort from the greatest propaganda machine of all time, the media. I am exaggerating a little, but shows, games, and movies that sort of normalized the existence of queer people went a really long way. Queer people were always set to be villains if they did exist in stories. It was alright to have a queer character if they were absolutely the bad guy and were damned to hell by the end of the movie. You saw this most prominently in animated stuff, especially Disney. A couple of examples that come to mind are Hades in Hercules and Dr. Facilier in The Princess and the Frog, both of which are effeminate, queer-coded men that end up in some kind of eternal purgatory. For those curious, queer coding just means giving a character traits typically associated with queer people. Sure, the Lion King's Scar might not be explicitly gay, but his mannerisms and design very much are. The way he's animated is much lankier, sly, and more slick than Mufasa, who's portrayed with more traditional quote-unquote manly traits. Take notice of Scar's leaner body and triangular face, as well as his gestures and tone of voice.
Why, if it isn't my big brother descending from on high to mingle with the commoners?
Sarabi and I didn't see you at the presentation of Simba.
That was today? Oh, I feel simply awful. Must have slipped my mind.
These are stereotypes you'd normally associate with a gay man, especially back when The Lion King was in production. If you grew up watching these, you might guess that Scar's traits are just junk you'd find in any kids' movie villain, but that dates back to the long and tired history of LGBTQ+ traits being used exclusively for villains. Again, you either made the gay character a villain doomed to fail, or you didn't use them at all. That was until the internet became a thing. The internet was huge for the queer community. Admittedly, it was huge for the entire world, but the presence of the internet gave queer people the chance to connect remotely without the fear of being singled out in a public setting. Meetings could be planned, issues could be discussed, and there was learning to be done. For the confused, they could meet people like them more easily than ever before, rather than feeling horribly isolated in an environment that wasn't very welcoming. And things only went up from there. With LGBTQ+ movements growing in size and support, the media climate changed to accommodate. In 2009, ABC would release Christopher Lloyd and Stephen Lettivan's Modern Family, a sitcom that would solidify itself into the American mind by winning 22 Emmy Awards. In doing so, it also planted the idea that gay people were just people, rather than some alien community that was somehow dangerous. The show featured an openly gay couple, and rather than portray them as outdated stereotypes or comically flagrant caricatures, they were treated as normal people, and that kind of representation is what the community needed.
And I would say personally now that, I more on the front lines of what it means to stand up for people's equality and to try to tell people that, you don't choose to be gay. Not that I ever thought that, but like when people say that, it's like I'm just more active in that community and I feel a little bit more responsible for people's words and actions.
Maybe not the most elegant interview, but Mr. Stonestreet summarized what was effectively his effect on gay perception. The idea that gay men are some kind of sleazy slimeballs have been proliferated thanks to those queer-coded villains I mentioned, as well as general stereotypes running around. Depictions of gay men like the one seen in Modern Family really helped make gay people seem like a part of the quote-unquote natural world. There was even a survey done that asked if watching Modern Family changed the audience's opinion on gay marriage. 27% said the inclusion of these characters changed their stance to be in support of it. Similar treatment was given to gay women, but in different forms. Lesbians are pretty widely known to be a weirdly fetishized demographic. To the public, it's a strange toss-up between something to hate or something to obsess over. Things like Madonna and Britney Spears kissing got super mixed reception, with some people seeing it as indecent and improper, while others thought it was quote-unquote culturally groundbreaking. Then there was the affair between Tila Tequila and Casey Johnson, which essentially shoved a giant magnifying glass into their private lives. My point being, the moment anything becomes somehow lesbian, it becomes a thing for people to stare and ogle at. That brings me to my next example, Signalis. Signalis is a sci-fi horror game released in late October of 2022 to a resoundingly positive reception, and for really good reason. It follows Elster, who is a pilot for the Penrose program in search of habitable planets. She and her partner, Ariane Young, crash on a deserted mining colony where they are quickly separated. The game is centered around Elster trying to find her again. You might be wondering what this has to do with lesbian representation, but it's really the fact that it doesn't focus too heavily on their relationship at all. Signalis does its storytelling through very brief, surreal cutscenes. What makes it so compelling is that we aren't explicitly shown their relationship, but rather fragments of it. While you're wading through hordes of horribly disfigured zombies, 3 words are constantly pounded into you. Remember our promise. Remember our promise. Elster made a promise, and she's going to keep it. The entire experience is a show of her dedication to Ariane, but without playing up the romantic and intimate aspects of it. They treat it with a lot more respect and dignity than a lot of modern romantic subplots. Okay, they sort of have to, since this is the entire plot, but even then, it's done in a way that feels genuine. It's that desperate, I'll do anything for her vibe that sells Elster's character. It gets to a point where, when the world is falling apart because of her actions, Elster continues what she's doing just to keep her promise to Ariane. There are plenty of other titles that do this in similar ways, but in different forms. Guilty Gear is a fighting game franchise that has been around since the 90s, and they've never been shy about their character designs being out of the norm. The main character, Soul Bad Guy, if you can tell by his name, is based off of Freddie Mercury, the bisexual rock icon we all know and love. And one of the boss characters in the very first game was Testament, a non-binary monster that the creator had said, they're androgynous. In fact, they've transcended human existence, just like me. All of them would return in the newest game, Strive, where a returning character, Bridget, would come out as trans. Both Testament and Bridget are characters that have struggled with their identity in previous games, but have come to their respective conclusions about themselves. For Bridget, she feels ashamed for wanting to be feminine because she was born AMAB, which is assigned male at birth. She's initially very self-loathing because of it, but decides to embrace the idea of who she really is when encouraged by her betters. Testament, meanwhile, spends their time in the story hating themselves for being quote-unquote inhuman, even though those around them didn't see them as such. Of course, by the end, they realize they're not as alone as they think.
Here I thought you would understand. I used to carry myself like some sort of demon too, even though I was surrounded by accepting people.
Both of these are very good interpretations of real gender crises people have. It's very common for queer kids to be raised to hate the way they were born, especially with the connotations of conversion therapy so heavy here in the States. Presenting 2 characters like this in a positive, more sympathetic light really helps with the whole here's something new thing, especially when you humanize them so well. Shows like Arcane and Castlevania do a great job of this, supplementing an incredible story with subtle hints of zest and lime. It's an incredibly articulate and emotional show that covers some heavy topics, and as such, the characters are equally as in-depth. Striga is a lesbian, yes, but she is also a walking tank of a vampire that regularly does this. At the same time, when she's trying to take over basically all of Europe, she's shown to be a very tactful person, understanding that while she and her sisters are eternal, their resources and energy are not.
You'd be out here fighting forever. I'd be back at Styria trying to keep supply lines intact forever. And we'd never see each other again.
Like a conventionally normal person, there's more to her than just the kind of people she's into. At the same time, it is undeniably a part of her character, because her love for Marana is what drives her to do what she does in the story. Seeing queer representation like this means a lot to the community. If you don't believe me, this is a testimonial from a trans person I know regarding the representations of trans characters in the media. We're actually allowed on television, and it's kind of becoming normal. Some people are all, I don't like this, they're turning my children gay. The thing is, if I had seen trans characters in shows, if I had known that this wasn't a problem to be fixed, then I probably wouldn't have wanted to kill myself as much back then. It's a little grim, but that's the truth we live in. Being told that the way you are is unnatural, that your thoughts are wrong and you need to be corrected really takes a toll. It makes you wish you weren't born this way, and if you're left wishing like that for a while, you wish you weren't born at all. And nothing good comes from that. And now look at where we are. It's a time where being queer is kinda accepted. There are support systems put into place for queer youth, and laws have been set to protect us. And acceptance of queer identity hasn't seen this kind of reception ever. So when I learned that queer people are quickly vanishing from government records, having their existence dismissed, and being threatened by a whole new wave of hateful rhetoric, I can sleep well at night knowing things will probably be fine. The community has been through hell and back when it comes to trying to fit in. If we could stomach Stonewall, we can stomach whatever's going on now. And anyone who tries to knock our community down is going to realize we didn't spend over 100 years limping up the social staircase to be shoved down in a measly 100 days. So thank you for your time. And be warned, we're very annoying and very persistent.